Radio, the government say, is no longer the poor relation of television. It's a medium of great power and versatility. But for far too long, they claim, it's been kept on much too tight a rein. Now, with additional frequencies becoming available, the government want to open up the airwaves, ending the BBC's 65-year monopoly of the national networks and allowing hundreds of community groups the chance to start their own stations to cater for every possible taste. To add greater consumer choice and competition, the Green Paper proposes up to 3 additional national radio services run on commercial lines. But the government are against the idea of privatising BBC Radios 1 and 2.
I think that the customer and the listener will do better if there is more choice and if radio is allowed to have its head.
I mean, I think what it clearly does is gives a fillip to radio, because the intention is to try and step up the amount of choice gradually over stages through to the middle 90s.
With several independent local radio stations having gone to the wall in the past 2 years, there have been worries that there won't be enough advertising to go round. But the government say that by relaxing technical standards and having all independent services more lightly regulated, the companies will be able to reduce costs to advertisers. 3 options are proposed for supervising the new services, either expanding the role of the IBA or the Cable Authority, or creating an entirely new radio authority. So what can the listener expect in the next decade?
He can expect what he finds in other countries, a wealth of choice on radio, corresponding to the wealth of technical choice which is now available. And he will twiddle his switch, he'll get used to where he likes, where the programs are that he likes, and I hope there'll be a wider range of choice.
Today's Green Paper follows the Peacock report on the future of broadcasting published in July of last year. That suggested giving listeners and viewers a better choice through deregulation. The government wants to do that by sheer power of numbers. There'd be hundreds of local stations, 4 national BBC networks, 3 national commercial stations. So, will there be the demand for so much radio? A point that I took up with Professor Alan Peacock.
There's no demand in the economist's sense. Nobody's paying anything directly because presumably all the commercial stations will be financed by advertising and the BBC will continue to be financed by the license. There won't be any subscription radio, so it's very difficult to tell.
But at a time when many local radio stations have complained about the difficulty of getting advertising, do you think there's going to be enough in the pool to go round for these new stations?
Well, I think that depends not only, of course, upon the demand for advertising, but I also think it depends on their cost structure and their flexibility. It may very well be that some local radio stations in such a regime would go to the wall, or that they would have to amalgamate with others to be viable. I think that's probably true, but one would hope that this Green Paper would point the way to a much less regulated local radio system, so for instance they can have their own transmitters, that they don't have to endure the enormously high engineering standards which they're subject to at present.
Most of your committee wanted to privatise BBC Radios 1 and 2. Mr. Hurd has said he doesn't want to do that. Is that a mistake?
That I think is a mistake. Remember, all the committee said the BBC should have the option. What I think is being suggested in the Green Paper is they shouldn't even have that. That's to say, to privatise Radios 1 and 2. But of course, everything's still open there. I mean, it's quite possible to have the BBC financed partly by a licence fee for radio, and also perhaps some advertisement on radio. Why not?
The BBC's chairman says that the BBC will flourish in this new era of competition. Do you go along with that, or are there difficulties along the way?
Well, it's bound to flourish, of course, if it's got an inside track. First of all, of course, it's an extremely able radio broadcaster with a great tradition. That's the first thing, so it produces a very good product all round. But secondly, if it's going to be financed simply by a compulsory tax, of course it has an added advantage over anybody else who's having to find the revenue from advertising or by other means.
Do you think that there are any knock-on effects for ITV with its reliance on advertising for income? Do you think that its take is going to be reduced?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. We did a lot of work on this, even in relation to radio. I think the impact of radio might be much more on the press than on the big national television networks. I think advertising on radio is a different kind of thing than advertising visually through the ordinary television network.
Radio networks to compete with